I thought I would talk to you a little bit about the work we're doing at UCLA, and hopefully some of this is applicable to other settings. And because UCLA is not the only place where we need to develop, to go beyond the issue of tolerance to true acceptance and inclusion of people from very different backgrounds and experiences, and to make sure that our institutions, our public life, as well as our social spheres are accommodating and open to all. I believe very strongly that the institution should be built for the people rather than the people trying to be squished into an institution. What I'm going to do is just explain the sort of scope of the UCLA issue, the mission that at least my office tries to develop along with the senior administration and a whole lot of people across the campus, and some of the tools we use to try to increase this. The chancellor's statement, when he originally was appointed as chancellor of UCLA, Gene Block, 3 years ago, specifically stated that he had 3 priorities: excellence, diversity, and community engagement. And with respect to diversity, the entire system, UCLA has 10 campuses, all the way from the most recent one in Merced to the first campus in Berkeley, California. Berkeley and UCLA are the 2 largest and friendly competitors, right? So that we have a very large institution, and the institution as a whole, all 10 campuses, got together to adopt a statement that diversity was an important educational value, that it was an important one to pursue, and that it had benefits that would flow not only to the students, but also to staff, to faculty, and to all the people of California. UCLA and the entire UC system is a land-grant college, a public set of universities, so that we have an obligation to serve the people of California, as well as an engagement with the rest of the nation, and in fact, at this point, for quite a few years, the world. The number of international, what we refer to as international students and faculty, has increased enormously. In fact, the student body at UCLA is close to 40,000. So this is, and then we have about 2,000 regular rank faculty, another 1,500 researchers, another 1,500 temporary and non-tenure track faculty, 3,000 staff members who are not students, another 1,500 who are both students and workers. So this is the size of a small city, and right next to a large city. So that one of the big advantage of being located in Los Angeles is that the city itself is so diverse. And as many of you know, Los Angeles brings together some of the largest populations of various countries outside of their own nation, right? So that UCLA is situated in a place that allows us to have an enormous range of experiences that can benefit both each other and the institution as a whole. As part of the chancellor's desire to see this notion of diversity through, and the president of the UC system, every campus has adopted what are called principles of community, and those are posted very visibly on several of the websites at the university. They're distributed at various for orientation. We just, a couple weeks ago, took out a full-page ad in the Daily Bruin to remind students and faculty and others, visitors to the campus, of what those principles entail. The Chancellor adopted these, and so did the Chancellor's Advisory Committee on diversity. That committee, there is a system-wide committee made up of representatives from all the campuses that is now called the President's Council on Culture, Climate, and Inclusion. And one of the sparks for this was a series of rather high-profile suicides and acts of violence in various campuses, not ours, thank goodness, across the country, and particularly some racist incidents at UC Davis, UC Irvine, and UC San Diego. We, of course, not being immune, wound up having a very widely viewed YouTube video by a UCLA student who complained about a particular racial group, i.e. Asians, in language that was derogatory and very unfortunate and hostile. The Chancellor immediately responded to that. Within 24 hours, there was a public statement by the Chancellor, and that's what Atia was referring to, stating that video did not reflect the values of UCLA. In fact, those values are contained in the UCLA Principles of Community. I brought just a couple copies of it, which I'll leave with Atia, so that people who are interested can, and they're also, of course, available on our website, diversity.ucla.edu. That's a pretty easy one to remember. But for instance, it says, we believe that diversity is critical to maintaining excellence in all our endeavors. This is a really important piece of the statement because many people used to believe that it was a trade-off. You could have the best, or you could have diversity, right? You could have the best and select only those people who were at the very top, or you could have a mix. And in fact, what we found is the mix is the top. If you go for a heterogeneous group, a group that comes from different places, has different experiences, brings different things to the table, you actually get better results. So that research has been key to our approach, that in fact, we find out that you get better results in a diverse group than you do in a group that's all one color, or all one religion, or all one race, or all one sex, right? That you get much better results for the people who are engaged in the work and for your final product. And I think that in some ways, the Pacifica has looked at that as well, as a way of bringing people together from different places to look at not only the ways and the things we share, but also the things that we uniquely bring to the table, each one of us. It also says we seek to foster open-mindedness, understanding, compassion, and inclusiveness among individuals and groups. Now, it used to be that universities said, oh, no, we're not trying to foster any particular values, right? All values are relative. But it's important that to say what you stand for. And these qualities of open-mindedness, willingness to hear other opinions that you may not agree with, understanding, being willing to not only listen, but also seek to understand, seek to really figure out what the other person's saying before you react. Compassion, which of course is, the Dalai Lama says that compassion is one of the most crucial qualities in every religion, not just Buddhism, not just Islam, not just Christianity, not just Judaism, but every single religion he believes has at the bottom that notion of compassion. And inclusiveness, which is more than simply tolerating people who are different. It's actually including them in the process and in the result. Also committed to ensuring freedom of expression and dialogue, so that the notion is we try to foster dialogue rather than simply say, you're right, you're wrong. First, we'll talk about it and then try to decide on a, excuse me, on a course. Now, I was looking at the fountain before we were coming in here, and I had read some of it when I was in Turkey on one of the trips that Pacifica sponsors. And it is trying to bring together scientific and spiritual ideas in the same, in a forum where they speak to each other. And I was reminded of an article I just read about in my alma mater's alumni magazine about one of the researchers who studies honeybees, and the way that he's discovered that honeybees, when they're trying to decide where their next hive will be, they all get together and hang out and buzz with each other, and and they may have different ideas when they start, and they keep going and keep buzzing, i.e. talking, right, until they reach a consensus, and then, and only then do they go. So instead of having one group that decides and the other group reluctantly going along, they spend hours or even days hanging out in this real tight cluster, having to communicate with each other, right? This sort of, and he claims that this is a model of how bees are engaged in democratic decision-making, right, through dialogue of a very different kind than ours, right? So I find all of these signs and signals everywhere in the scientific world, in religious, in religious books and principles and writings, and in academic research. All of these signs are, quite similar, that we need to communicate with each other, and that is how we get to a stage of cooperation and the best possible results. So, now the mission of my office is threefold: to increase diversity, primarily on the faculty. We started out as, my predecessor, in fact, her portfolio included only latter faculty. My portfolio is a little broader, and I'm interested in diversity at all levels, faculty, staff, and students, but my primary function is to help increase the diversity on the faculty. Inclusion, and that means, making sure that everybody not only is represented by being let in the door, but also is included in everything we do, and that their opinions are valued and they're valued as individuals. And also reaping the benefits of diversity and inclusion. And that means having those innovative and creative products of different people coming together, being able to disseminate those and use them for the benefit of everyone. Now, with respect to diversity, one of the things we do is that my office every year collects representation of diverse groups on the faculties of every single department on campus. And you can imagine all of this takes a lot of work. Why? Why? So that we can see whether, in fact, we're moving forward, backward, or standing still. And our progress has been very slow. In both, now we are required by law to maintain information on the different percentages of male and female faculty, and on the percentages of white, African American, Native American, and Latino faculty. And we also track Asian and Asian American and Asian and Pacific Islander. That's what the law, that's what the federal government requires us to know. We have to find out. When we do that, we find out that the university has increased the percentage of the underrepresented groups, both women of all races and men and women who are not white, by, so embarrassing, by 2% over 5 years. So it took us 5 years to increase by 2%. That's the bad news, right? The good news, well, this is also bad news. The good news for us is that's better than most other institutions, which are going backward. We're slow, but in the right direction. The problem right now in the U.S. is that many institutions are in fact going in the wrong direction, are becoming less diverse, are erecting new barriers to people of different classes, different races, different religions, different orientations. That's the bad news for the nation as a whole. So, I think we look terrible in terms of the progress we've made, but compared to other places, we look good. Go figure, right? So now we collect these data, we're required to. We're not required to collect data on other categories that are of interest to me and to the Chancellor and to all of us in terms of the principles of community. So we don't collect data on the number of faculty who ascribe to different religions. We don't know. In fact, we don't ask. Right? Now, interestingly, that works really well for some religions in which it's a private matter if you follow that religion. But for religions that require a public ritual or public space or public action, that, of course, that model doesn't work as well. So we have to think about, okay, religions are not just different in the sense of who practices in private and what do you practice in private, but also different in terms of how much religion is part of your daily life. In some religions, if you are not daily acting in public in particular ways, you are considered not to be a devout member of that religion. But you can be, I can tell you from experience, you can be a devout Christian and no one will know, right? Except your pastor when you show up in church, right? Or your confessor if you're Catholic, right? Nobody else has to know. Those are very different things. And how do we try to bring those two together so that people for whom religion is private and those for whom it's public both feel like they're part of the process? One of the things that we've done to foster inclusion is that the Chancellor and I sat down right before I started. I've only been in this job 6 months, so I'm sure we're still at the beginning. But right before I started, the Chancellor and I sat down and developed a list of representatives from faculty, staff, students, administrators, graduate students and undergraduate students, and alumni and community leaders, and said, we're going to bring these folks together at least once a quarter, so 3 times a year. So far, we've done it 5 times. And keep upping the ante, right? That and take a look at our practices from 20,000 feet, right? We're going to look at the broad picture and what kind of trends are we seeing and what can we do? What can we recommend from bringing all these different perspectives together? And we tried to make sure that we had representation of different races, different as well as different roles in the university and outside, but different races, different religions, different national origin, and as well as levels of ability, disability. People with disabilities were included, and different sexual orientations. So that when we get this group in a room, right, we're coming from very different places. And it's been incredibly interesting, and I chair those meetings. And the Chancellor attends most of the time. So the chancellor is actually listening to opinions from such a variety of people, and we're trying to work together to develop general policies and general practices. So it's not enough just to tell people, representation, but also to try to work toward inclusion and the ability to work together on these projects and these problems. I'm going to tell you about a couple specific things that we've done recently. The Dean of Education, Dean of Undergraduate Education, and I got together and said, with these budget cuts, which are horrendous, I'm sorry, but in what other country do you sacrifice education, right? But this is a problem. But, all right, so we have to deal with the budget cuts. And in this era, we tend to cut out some of the most interesting courses, ones that are about diversity, so that we have enough room for what's called the core, or, the requirements, right? All right, so we're worried about that. So we got together and we said, okay, we're each going to put in some of our funds, and we are going to give awards for innovative courses on diversity. And they have to be taught by someone who's not on the regular faculty, so that we can increase the number of different people involved, right? So we have graduate students or postdocs or lecturers teaching them, and they have to involve more than one department. Can't just have your own course, right? You've got to work with another department. And we did this as a competition. We said, well, we'll give up to, I think we're giving 8 awards this year. So we're funding 8 courses that probably would not have been offered in the next academic year, that probably would not have been offered without this program. And we'll guarantee for the year after that. Wonderful, wonderful applications for courses. That one course, which is on the history of transsexuality. So how much do we know about people who choose to change their sex? How much? We know very little, right? So there's a course that will cross that barrier between, of course, women's studies and history and sociology, to teach about transsexuality, how it develops, what it entails. We have one that is on global human rights, global human rights, that's a cross between the society and genetics and anthropology. So anthropologists study groups in different places, and society and genetics studies what the relationship is between your genes and how you create societies. Let's get these two together, right? So that's the kind of thing that it's one of the things that we initiated this year. Another thing is that one of the things we found when we try to be inclusive, for instance, on gender grounds, is that male and female faculty do not have the same needs when it comes to making sure they're as productive as possible. Female faculty tend to have more responsibility for childcare or for the care of elderly parents, whether they're my parents or, husband's parents or partner's parents, that women tend to take on that. Well, can you expect, so if you treat men and women exactly the same, you're going to have an extra burden on the women. So we develop programs to provide a little extra funding to go to conferences, because when our male faculty go to conferences, they just leave the kids at home. But when our female faculty go to conferences, they have to arrange for a babysitter or an extra seat to take the baby with, right? So that's one way that gender equity enters into this inclusiveness. It's not enough just to bring people in. You have to also make sure that their needs are treated as equally important.